presentation, you want to tell a story. Okay, no matter how you look at it, slice it or dice it, whether it's 5 slides, 10 slides, or 15 slides, you want to tell a story, okay? And I usually use the example of 5 W's and 1 H that the great Taiichi Ohno, the inventor of the Toyota production system, used in manufacturing and any type of a lean, efficient business process, is that you want to incorporate the 5 W's into the presentation throughout, and the H. And what I mean by that is why you started the idea or the company, why you were driven to do so, and you want to incorporate that inside the story. Why the consumers like it. If you're already out there with a prototype, or if you're talking to potential consumers, you want to explain why they already like it, because as an investor, of course, I want to know that you're going to get some market traction. Hopefully, if you're going to the VC route, you've already have some market traction because you developed a beta prototype of your digital product. And then, of course, why you solve their need or problem. So those are the type of questions you want to have in your presentation. And then, of course, why the partners, the market, the media is going to get behind this idea. And that would be kind of nice, because then I know as a VC that even though you're going to fight market inertia with your and resistance to you because of your great revolutionary product or idea or service, that somehow you know that what are the key components or variables that are going to enable you to penetrate the market, and why the market is going to get behind you. And then, of course, why you're fundable. For heaven's sake, that's the whole objective of this startup pitch, is that you're selling yourself, you're selling the company, you're selling the founders and the vision, yada, yada, yada. But bottom line is you also have to explain why you're fundable. And there's many reasons, and the slides that we're going to incorporate and standardize are going to explain that. And then, of course, the H is the how you're going to get it done. So those type of things have to be incorporated in a story. You know, of course, you want to maybe give perfect examples. Like for one of the startups that we're funding under Stealth, I actually created a whole story of why the startup was founded. And one of the things I realized is that for some investors, I had to minimize the story, because some investors are definitely ADD and they want you to get to the point. So you also want to be flexible. And one of the things I wanted to tell you is that the function of this, the startup pitch is, of course, it's like a product, and you either want to get a meeting, okay, or you want to get to this point where you're going into the meeting with a fantastic presentation and you're going to the next stage of due diligence. However, I must warn you that I'm not a big fan of you sending out any type of startup sales pitch or presentation to the investors at all. However, if you do know some of them, you could, and we'll show you soon in the rest of the presentation, you could customize, grab a couple of slides, put it into a very short 3-slide presentation, send it to the investors that you know feel comfortable about, that they're not going to circulate it all over the market, and see if they're interested in you coming in giving a 30-minute presentation. So you want to also, the objective of the startup pitch is that you want to engage the investors and you want to have them interact when necessary. And of course, one of the things that totally irritated me when I had entrepreneurs pitch me for money is that if they came to me in a particular sector that I was very knowledgeable about, and they started going over some of the market overview that I was like really familiar with, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna go to sleep here. They continue to go through it, even though I would say, you know, you can skip this, I already know the market, I live it every day, and they would just continue going over that market overview presentation when instead they should have been going to the next slide and continuing the sales presentation. So be very careful that when you're pitching somebody, whether they're an angel or a venture capitalist or any type of investor that I discussed in some of the other videos, is that you know your audience. I mean, if the person is extremely knowledgeable about a specific sector, and you know, for instance, that they've invested into that sector with various startups, and of course your startup that you're pitching for that, like social media as an example, if you have a VC that's funded the 3-4 social media startups and you're pitching them in social media, well, for heaven's sake, that don't, if you give them a market slide that talks about social media, skip it if they're getting bored, because the objective is for you to continue with the presentation, make it simple and exciting, and get to the point of where the investors is very interested in proceeding further. So that's overall of what I wanted to talk to you about in terms of the startup pitch. And now I'm going to go through the standardization of it, because this is one of the problems I see with a lot of entrepreneurs, okay? Because a lot of the entrepreneurs, like I said, do not have design skills, and especially, like, for instance, in terms of packaging for investors. So what I usually do is, and I'm going to talk about two things. A lot of the entrepreneurs also use Microsoft PowerPoint. It's a good program, don't get me wrong. I have a little bit of a different process. I actually learned this from a designer out of Silicon Valley, and this guy was unbelievable. This guy knew Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop like he could do it in his sleep. And when I saw him develop his startup presentations, he used Photoshop and Illustrator instead of PowerPoint to design his presentations. So what I've done is I learned from him, and actually I learned some design because of him. He inspired me. So when I do my startup presentations for the companies we're funding and want to take into the marketplace, I actually use Illustrator and Photoshop, and then I put it into PowerPoint. So what I do is I usually, and you have to think of it like a napkin, okay? So you want to think in terms of napkins. So for instance, if you look at a PowerPoint slide, okay, napkins are obviously square, so we'll just extend it, which is great news because you have more space to explain your vision. So what I usually do is I look at it, I design an Illustrator, I design a template, okay, and then the first thing I do is I have a line, a solid line, okay, and then what I do, okay, I have a space for a logo here, okay. So for instance, for entrepreneurdex, okay, we actually designed the logo that kind of looks like an egg, okay, because we're dealing with startups. So actually the entrepreneurdex new logo looks simple, but there was a lot of thought behind it because we wanted to make it simple, which logos have to be. And so we designed the E in the shape of the egg, and you can look at it on the website. So what I do is I usually have a logo placement here to the right, and it goes down. So the line is like right there. Okay, and then down at the bottom I usually have like another line, and then what I do is I put a little box, and by the way I will provide the templates for you to see all this, and I'm drawing it right now. And also when you're designing the startup pitch templates, do it with hand, just draw it out. I mean, even if it looks horrible, it's okay, at least you're playing with the design and concept. So what I usually do is, and I'll show you this one, is there's like a number page. And then what I did on this one particular design is I had it like that, and then I put a little bit of lines here, so it kind of looked like he was jumping up, and the numbering was kind of cool.